They say grief comes in waves. But for me, it came in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't let you sleep. The kind that makes a two-story house echo like a tomb. That was my life after Charles passed away. My husband of 41 years. My lighthouse. Gone in the blink of a breath. We had built our lives together from the bones up, a mortgage we strangled with 2 decades of discipline, a retirement plan we barely tasted, and a son we loved more than oxygen. Daniel. My only child. My pride. My purpose. After Charles was gone, people called, of course. Sent casseroles and flowers. But after the first 2 weeks, the world kept spinning. And I stayed still. Alone in a house full of framed memories and cold furniture. Then Daniel called. Mom, it doesn't make sense for you to live alone anymore. Sophie and we've talked about it. We want you to come live with us. At first, I hesitated. Not because I didn't love my son, but because I was afraid of becoming a burden. Sophie and Daniel had just had their first baby. They were adjusting to parenthood, building careers. I didn't want to intrude. But Daniel was persistent. We've got the space. And Sophie said she'd love to have you. Seriously. She's been saying it for weeks. I'll admit, that surprised me. Sophie and I weren't close. Not enemies, but never warm. Polite smiles. Small talk at family dinners. She always struck me as polished. Controlled. Like someone born in a showroom and afraid of fingerprints. But maybe I misjudged her. Maybe, I told myself, this was a new beginning. Maybe I could help. Maybe I could hold my grandchild and feel needed again. So I said yes. And that's how I ended up standing on their front porch in Chicago, suitcase in hand, wearing the cardigan Charles had bought me for our 35th anniversary. Sophie opened the door. She looked picture perfect. Long blonde hair in a high ponytail, leggings that probably cost more than my entire outfit, and teeth white enough to be mistaken for LED lights. Margaret, she said with a voice coated in syrup. You're here. She gave me a hug, light and brief, the kind that says, let's get this over with. Still, I smiled. I was going to make this work. Inside, the house smelled of lemon cleaner and vanilla candles. Spotless. Cold. Not a photo frame out of line. Not a speck of dust. The kind of house you hesitate to exhale in. Daniel greeted me with a bear hug. His arms felt familiar, like a warm coat you haven't worn in years. He looked tired. New father tired. But happy to see me. Let me show you to your room, Sophie said. She led me down the hallway to a tidy guest room, neutral colors, minimalist furniture. A small welcome note on the nightstand. It read, Welcome, Margaret. We're happy to have you. Sophie. It was a nice touch. I believed it. I wanted to. The first few days passed smoothly. I cooked. Cleaned. Helped with the baby. I stayed out of the way. I didn't want to disrupt anything. I thought I was doing everything right. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things started to shift. One morning, as I adjusted the thermostat, just bumped it up by 2 degrees, Sophie came in and smiled thinly. Oh, I usually keep it at 68, she said. It messes with my sinuses otherwise. I nodded. Of course. Not a problem. Another time, I left a cup of tea on the kitchen counter while I rocked the baby. Sophie walked in, stared at the mug, and sighed just loudly enough. I try not to leave things out, she said. It just invites clutter, you know? I apologized. Moved the cup. Still smiled. Then came the seating issue. Sophie liked her decorative pillows arranged a certain way. One evening, I sat down on the couch after folding some laundry and didn't realize I'd moved one. Later that night, she fluffed it with a little too much energy. These cushions sink so easily. I just got them custom ordered. I offered to sit elsewhere. She laughed. Oh no, it's not a big deal. Just, I like things a certain way. Each comment was small. Minor. Easily dismissed. But when raindrops hit the same spot long enough, even stone starts to wear down. And I began to feel the drip. Drip, don't use the bathroom light after 10. It wakes the baby. Drip, don't use the kitchen past 7. We meal prep. Drip, don't wear perfume. The scent lingers in the air. I started taking my tea in my room. Started timing my steps so I wouldn't make noise when Sophie was on a conference call. I folded towels the way she liked. Ate dinner when they did. Complimented her cooking even when it tasted like cardboard covered in truffle oil. But the line between accommodation and erasure blurs fast. And I was slowly being erased. If this first chapter resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the channel. This is only the beginning. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see how far this story reaches. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part one keep thinking about now. There wasn't a single moment I could point to and say, that's where it turned. No explosion. No cruel outburst. Just small, subtle changes, one rule at a time. The rules began like whispers. Gentle, almost apologetic. Would you mind not using the dryer after 8 p.m.? It vibrates through the nursery wall. Hey Margaret, just a heads up, we don't use paper towels. It's a zero-waste household. Oh, I forgot to mention, please don't feed the baby anything unless I've approved it. It's just allergies, Of course, I said yes to everything. I didn't want to cause trouble. I thought it was temporary. But the yes turned into patterns, and soon I realized I was tiptoeing through my own life. I began keeping a notebook. Just a little pocket-sized thing to remind myself. Not because I was forgetting, but because I needed to remember what was changing. March 5th, no spices in the cooking. Too overwhelming. March 8th, no airing out blankets outside. Pollen. March 10th, can't vacuum before noon. Baby nap window. March 14th, keep TV volume under 12. Triggers Sophie's migraines. These weren't outrageous on their own. Any one of them could be justified. But they added up. I felt like a tenant under surveillance. A guest who overstayed her welcome. Only no one had said it out loud yet. The first real conflict came over the dining table. Sophie was hosting her book club and made it clear that the evening would be child-free and chaos-free. I understood. I planned to stay in my room, give her space. But I had forgotten my knitting needles on the dining chair. I crept in after the women had settled into their wine and charcuterie board. I didn't say a word. I just leaned in, gently picked up my needles, and turned to go. That's when I heard her. Sophie's voice. Smooth, but sharpened at the edges. Margaret, could you not walk through during my event? I just really need to maintain a certain energy. I'm sure you understand. All 6 women turned to look at me. I stood there for a second too long. Felt my cheeks flush. I mumbled an apology and retreated like a child caught sneaking cookies. I cried that night. Quietly. Into my pillow. It wasn't what she said, it was the way she said it. Like I was a nuisance. An obstacle to be managed. And Daniel. My sweet boy. He noticed none of it. Or perhaps he chose not to. His work schedule was brutal. Late nights, early mornings, conference calls. He was exhausted. And when Sophie kissed him, handed him a glass of wine, and told him how smoothly the book club went, he just smiled and kissed her forehead. You're amazing, he whispered to her. I heard it from the hallway. She was. Amazing at control. At performance. At keeping everything just this side of cruel. The next morning, I made muffins. Blueberry, his favorite. I left 2 on a plate for him with a little note that said, "Love you always, Mom." It was gone when I came back from the market. Not eaten. Thrown away. The plate was in the dishwasher. The note in the trash. A few days later, I found my knitting basket moved to the basement storage. "Just tidying up," Sophie said. "You don't want needles around the baby." I wasn't even allowed to hold the baby as much anymore. She would swoop in with that bright smile and say, "Oh, looks like someone needs a diaper change," or, "He gets fussy around new perfumes." I had worn the same lavender lotion for 20 years. The worst part was the small smiles. The eye contact that lingered half a second too long. Like she knew what she was doing. Like she was daring me to say something. But I didn't. I didn't say a word. Because I was scared that if I pushed back, I'd be asked to leave. And if I left, where would I go? The house Charles and I built had been sold after his death. I gave Daniel part of that money to help with this home. My name wasn't on the deed. It was just easier that way, we all said. Simpler. That word, easier, always seems to benefit the wrong people. So I kept my head down. Folded towels the way she liked them. Took showers at odd hours to avoid hot water rush. Cleaned crumbs from counters I never used. But every time she added a rule, I added a note in my little journal. I didn't know why at first. Maybe it was to convince myself I wasn't imagining it. Maybe it was to leave a record, in case things ever got worse. They would. But not yet. Not quite. For now, I was still the smiling mother-in-law, politely nodding as my world shrank, inch by inch, room by room. And she was still the smiling wife, wearing kindness like a perfectly tailored jacket, beautiful to look at, but with blades stitched into every seam. When I close my eyes and think back to that time, I remember the silence most. The silence of a house that was never mine. The silence of a son who stopped asking how I was. And the silence of rules that weren't shouted, but whispered, until they wrapped around my neck like a noose. There's a kind of silence that hums. Not peaceful or still, but charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. That was the air in the house. A stillness too sharp to relax in. Every footstep carefully measured. Every drawer opened with the gentleness of someone trying not to wake a beast. The walls weren't just painted beige, they felt beige. Colorless. Emotionless. And yet, underneath it all, something was cracking. One morning, I misplaced my reading glasses. I looked everywhere, kitchen, bedside table, even under the bathroom sink. After 15 minutes of searching, I found them on the floor behind the TV console. Odd. I don't read in the living room. Never had. I mentioned it casually at breakfast. Sophie looked up from her tablet, spooned a bit of yogurt into her mouth, and said, "You probably just forgot." "It happens, right?" She said it with a laugh. But there was something in the way she held her gaze. Like she was studying me. Testing. I nodded, but a chill passed through me. A few days later, the TV remote disappeared. Daniel was working late. Sophie was in the nursery, rocking the baby. I looked everywhere, again. Finally found it hours later, tucked into the freezer behind a bag of peas. I never went in the freezer. And yet, I blamed myself. The next week, I opened the pantry to find my tin of herbal tea dumped out. Leaves scattered. Tin dented. Sophie raised an eyebrow when I asked about it. "I didn't touch your tea," she said. "Maybe you forgot to close the lid properly. It happens more often when people start, you know. Aging." She said it so casually. Like she was commenting on the weather. I froze. I wanted to argue, to shout, to say, "No, that's not true. That's not me." But my voice stayed in my throat. The worst came on a Thursday morning. I had just finished cleaning the guest bathroom when Sophie knocked on my bedroom door. "I don't want to make a big deal out of this," she began, but I noticed the dog leash was missing from the hook. "You didn't accidentally take it somewhere, did you?" "I haven't walked the dog," I said. "Not in days." "I thought you took him yesterday." Her eyes narrowed. "No. I was home all day. It's just odd. A lot of little things are going missing lately." I waited. The silence stretched. My fingers clenched. She stepped closer. "You haven't been confused lately, have you?" There it was. The word again. Confused. Just like the last time she slipped it into conversation, like poison in honey. "No," I said, gently. "I'm fine." "Of course," she said, smiling too wide. "Of course you are." The next morning, she called my son into the kitchen while I was wiping down the high chair. "I think Mom's overwhelmed," she said. "She's been misplacing things. I worry." I stood 5 feet away, frozen, as if I weren't even there. Daniel rubbed his forehead, bleary-eyed from sleep. "Is that true, Mom?" I turned to look at him. He looked so tired. So easily led. I opened my mouth to speak, but all that came out was, "It's nothing. I'm just adjusting." He kissed Sophie on the cheek and said, "Thanks for telling me." That night, I stayed up late, watching the shadows shift across the ceiling. Was I being paranoid? Were these little things just aging? Stress? No. No, I knew better. I was being watched. Tested. She wanted me to question my own mind. She wanted him to question it too. It was gaslighting, pure and simple. Slowly, steadily, she was building a narrative. Planting seeds in Daniel's head. Margaret is slipping. Margaret is fragile. Margaret is losing it. And I was being erased, one quiet moment at a time. I began documenting everything. Every strange incident. Every misplaced item. Every comment. I wrote it down in that little pocket journal I kept hidden behind the lining of my suitcase. And then I started noticing her patterns too. Sophie always waited until Daniel wasn't looking. A cutting comment slipped between sips of coffee. An insult disguised as a joke. A warning glance across the dinner table. And always that fake smile. I thought of Charles. Of how he would have told me to stand up for myself. How he would have never let this happen. But he wasn't here. I was alone. And I needed to be smart. Not loud. Not angry. Smart. She wanted me to fall apart. I would make her think I was. I would let her believe it, just long enough. It's strange, the things that break you. You expect it'll be something big. A betrayal. A slap. A shout. But sometimes it's just soup. It was an unusually cold Sunday. One of those gray, skeletal days when even the walls feel tired. Daniel was working from home, the baby was fussy, and Sophie had barricaded herself in the upstairs office for a Zoom conference she claimed was career-defining. I decided to make chicken soup. The real kind. Bone broth, bay leaf, carrots chopped with care. The same way I'd made it for 40 years. Charles used to call it medicine in a bowl. Daniel loved it as a boy. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would be a gesture. A peace offering. Something warm in a house that was quickly going cold around me. As the broth simmered, I set the table quietly. No fancy cloth napkins. No demands. Just 2 bowls, spoons, and a small plate of saltine crackers. The kind Daniel used to eat with 3 at a time when he was sick. The smell filled the house. That comforting, nostalgic aroma of something honest. Sophie came down, phone in hand, heels clicking like accusations against the tile floor. She stopped. Sniffed the air. Her face twisted. What is that smell? I turned from the stove, still holding the ladle. Chicken soup. I thought it might help soothe the baby. And Daniel's been working all weekend, so I figured, it smells like a pet store, she snapped. Like wet dog and onions. I blinked. It's just soup. It's disgusting, she said. God, how much garlic did you use? I looked into the pot. The same amount as always. Before I could respond, she crossed the room, yanked the pot off the burner, and poured it directly into the sink. I watched the broth swirl down the drain like something dying. She turned the water on full blast. Don't cook without asking, she said. Ever again. Daniel came down the stairs, rubbing his temples. Sophie, I whispered. I made it for you both. It was just soup. She's making the whole house smell like a nursing home, Sophie said, turning to him. I had a migraine for 2 hours during my call. Daniel looked between us. I waited for something. A protest. A line drawn. A shred of defense. But he only said, let's all just take some space, okay? Space. That word again. Like I was a contaminant in need of quarantine. I didn't cry. Not right away. I went to my room. Closed the door. Sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the crack in the wall by the baseboard. I felt the weight of the silence again. But this time, it didn't feel like grief. It felt like anger. A slow burn. A kettle just starting to whistle. Later that night, I found the baby fussing in his crib. Sophie was in the bathroom, on her phone, laughing. I picked him up, rocked him gently, whispered the lullaby Daniel used to fall asleep to. Sophie burst into the room minutes later. Don't touch him, she snapped. I don't want him smelling like soup all night. I froze. She snatched the baby from my arms and left the room, slamming the door behind her. I sat in the rocking chair, still holding the air where my grandson had just been. That was when I decided. I wasn't going to wait for Daniel to wake up. I wasn't going to wait for Sophie to get bored of her cruelty. I had to start protecting myself. Not with anger. But with strategy. She thought she had control. That I was old, soft, and slow. That she could reshape the story however she wanted. But there's something she didn't know. I'd been a schoolteacher for 30 years. I've broken up fights, calmed panic attacks, caught cheating without raising my voice. I've read faces. Patterns. Tones. I know how to wait. And I know how to collect the truth. The next morning, I ordered something online. A hidden camera. Small enough to tuck behind the bookshelf in the living room. Just high enough to catch everything. I told myself I was just documenting things, just in case. Just a safety net. But deep down, I already knew. I wasn't just documenting. I was preparing. You don't notice how fragile your place in a house is, until you're standing outside of it. It was early March. Still cold enough in Chicago that you could see your breath in the morning. I'd gotten into the habit of grabbing the newspaper around 7 a.m., just before anyone else stirred. It gave me a few quiet moments. Just me, the crisp air, and a world not yet awakened by Sophie's rules. That morning, I left my bedroom, slipped on my cardigan, and pulled the door gently shut behind me. I didn't bring my phone. I wasn't going far. The porch was only 10 steps away. I stepped outside. Picked up the paper. Smiled faintly at the small bluebird that had returned to the feeder out front. When I reached for the doorknob to head back in, it wouldn't budge. Locked. I blinked. Tried again. Still locked. I knocked, gently at first. Then again, harder. I called out. Hello? Daniel? Sophie? Nothing. I knocked louder. Still nothing. I went around to the back door. Also locked. No lights were on. No footsteps. No sound. I stood in the cold, hugging the paper to my chest. I had no shoes on. Just thick socks. My fingers began to ache. Then my toes. The wind sliced through my sweater like it wasn't even there. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Then 30. My hands were trembling when the door finally opened. Sophie stood there in leggings and a fleece hoodie, holding a steaming mug. "Oh," she said, blinking like she'd just spotted a raccoon on the porch. "Were you out here this whole time?" I stared at her. Lips chapped. Fingers numb. "Yes." I stepped out for the paper. The door locked behind me. She smiled sweetly. "That's weird. I thought you'd already gone for your walk. I figured you'd taken your key." "I didn't bring my key." "Oh. Well, I guess it's good I came down when I did." She stepped aside. I walked in. My socks left damp prints on the hardwood. I headed straight for the bathroom, locked the door, and turned on the faucet. I stood there, hands under the warm water, trying to feel my fingers again. But all I could feel was rage. She knew. Of course she knew. She had locked the door on purpose. And Daniel? Still asleep upstairs. Unaware. Or worse, avoiding it. He always had a talent for staying busy when things got uncomfortable. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook, my tea, and a blanket around my shoulders. Sophie breezed in. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe it's time to install one of those keypad locks, you know? For safety. In case the baby wanders out someday. What do you think?" She met my eyes as she sipped from her mug. I nodded slowly. "Sure. That makes sense." She smiled, satisfied. I turned the page in my notebook and wrote, March 21st, locked out for 35 minutes. Outside temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit. No apology. No concern. Excuse, thought you'd left. Suggested keypad lock. Intimidation tactic. I wrote it down like a scientist observing wildlife. Because that's what it felt like. I was the specimen. The test subject. How far could she push me before I snapped? How much control could she exert before I vanished entirely? But I wasn't going to snap. Not yet. I was going to let her keep tightening the rope. Let her believe I was too polite, too fragile, too slow to notice. Let her create her perfect little version of reality. Because I had something she didn't know about. That camera I had ordered. It arrived 2 days later. And I installed it that same night. Right behind the bookshelf in the living room. Out of sight. But it would see everything. I've always kept a diary. Not a dramatic one. No poetry or lofty confessions. Just an honest account of what the day gave me, and what it took. I started keeping one the day after Charles and I were married. He used to tease me for it, calling it the daily log of how Margaret keeps the world from falling apart. But he respected it too. Said it made me the calmest person he knew. After he passed, I wrote in it every night. Quiet entries. Desperate ones. Some filled with memories of him, others just documenting the temperature, the sounds the house made, the food I barely touched. When I moved in with Daniel and Sophie, my entries changed. They went from sadness to vigilance. From, "I miss Charles," to, "Sophie changed the laundry schedule again," and, "Daniel looked tired today but didn't speak to me." The diary became my reality check. I kept it tucked safely in my nightstand drawer, under my folded scarves, inside a canvas pouch. It wasn't just a habit anymore, it was evidence. That's why, when I opened the drawer one morning and found it gone, my heart stopped. The scarves were there. The pouch was there. But the diary, weeks of notes, thoughts, exact phrases Sophie had used, was missing. I searched everywhere. My closet, my suitcase, the bookshelf, even under the bed. Nothing. I tried to stay calm, not let panic show. But something inside me knew exactly what had happened. That afternoon, while folding the baby's onesies in the laundry room, I heard the unmistakable flush of a toilet upstairs. Then I heard Sophie laugh. Not loudly. Not maniacally. Just a short, cruel giggle. Like someone who knew she'd just erased something irreplaceable. I went back to my room and stared into the empty drawer. Later that night, I asked Sophie casually, "Have you seen a little notebook of mine? It's canvas covered. I write in it sometimes." She looked up from her phone with a face so blank it was almost impressive. "Nope," she said. "Haven't seen anything like that. Maybe you misplaced it?" The words hit me harder than I expected. Not just because of the lie, but because of what it meant. She wasn't just pushing me now. She was hunting. She was actively working to dismantle me, to unmake me from the inside out. The diary had been more than paper. It had been my defense, my sanity, my mirror. And now it was ashes in a sewer pipe. That night, I wrote on plain copy paper. Dated it. Numbered the pages. Hid it in 3 separate locations, one taped under the dresser drawer, one inside the pillowcase, and one behind the insulation in the closet. If she wanted to silence me, she was going to have to work harder. But the worst part wasn't the diary. It wasn't even the fact that she had read it. It was that she'd done it and smiled. She was escalating. And Daniel, he was more distant than ever. He came home late. Ate dinner with one hand on his phone. Kissed the baby. Kissed Sophie. He didn't look at me much anymore. When he did, it was with a quiet pity. As if I were slowly slipping out of the picture and he didn't quite know how to stop it, or if he even wanted to. I began to feel like wallpaper. I watched as my son slipped further away and my daughter-in-law stepped further in. She arranged everything, meals, schedules, visitors, even the thermostat settings. She was sculpting the household into her image. Every soft curve replaced with sharp corners. Every time I tried to speak to Daniel, she would appear. Every time I reached for a moment of connection, she'd intercept it with a fake smile and a comment like, "Oh, Mom's been a bit forgetful lately." It's adorable. That word again. Forgetful. She was building the story piece by piece, laying the foundation for what I now fully understood. She wanted me gone. Not just from the house. From the picture. From the narrative. From Daniel's life. The diary may have been flushed, but the camera was not. It blinked silently from behind the shelf, capturing every sideways comment. Every roll of the eyes. Every whispered threat. It wasn't much. But it was something. And unlike paper, video couldn't be flushed. It's a strange thing, feeling your own sanity questioned in the very place you're supposed to feel safest. That's what gaslighting does. It's slow. Subtle. Precise. It doesn't start with someone telling you you're crazy. It starts with someone suggesting, gently, almost lovingly, that maybe you're just a little off. That's how Sophie played it. Always with that tight-lipped smile. That gentle tone that was just a shade too bright. One morning, I came downstairs to find her pacing the kitchen with her phone in one hand and a baby bottle in the other. She looked frazzled, but perfectly made up, as always. She didn't greet me. Just said, "Did you unplug the baby monitor?" I blinked. No. I didn't touch it. It was off this morning. We missed his crying. I had to run in when he was already soaked. It's important we all stay aware, Margaret. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. But she let the sentence hang there like a rope with a loop tied. Daniel came down shortly after, stretching, yawning. Sophie barely looked up. Monitor was off this morning. I think your mom accidentally hit the switch again. I didn't argue. I just walked to the sink, poured myself a cup of water, and sat down. My hands were trembling. Later that day, I checked the monitor's plug myself. It had dust on it. The switch was stiff, clearly untouched for days. But the seed had already been planted. Daniel's glances were different now. Not angry. Just cautious. Hesitant. Like I might break, or worse, like I was already breaking. 2 nights later, I heard them talking behind the nursery door. She says she didn't touch it, but I don't know anymore, Sophie whispered. Daniel replied, voice low, maybe she's overwhelmed. It's been a lot. She left the stove on, too, Sophie added. Twice this week. That wasn't true. I hadn't even cooked. But it didn't matter. She was laying the groundwork. Then came the television remote again. Gone. I didn't even bother looking this time. I knew I hadn't touched it. That evening, Daniel found it in the laundry basket. Sophie turned to me and said, that's 3 times now, Margaret. I didn't put it there, I said quietly. I'm not judging, she said. It happens to the best of us. She turned to Daniel. Do you think maybe we should schedule a general checkup? Just to be safe? He didn't answer right away. Just sipped his drink. I stared at him, willing him to say something. Anything. But the silence between us had become a canyon, wide and echoing. When he finally spoke, it was with that same helpless tone he used when he was 13 and had broken a neighbor's window. I just want to make sure you're okay, Mom. That's all. I wanted to scream. To throw something. To grab his shoulders and shake the sleep out of him. Instead, I smiled. Just a little. Because I realized something important in that moment. She was overplaying her hand. The lies were too easy. Too frequent. So frequent they would eventually contradict each other. But I couldn't rush this. If I protested too loudly, I'd only make her story stronger. So I let her spin it. Let her make herself the hero, the overwhelmed daughter-in-law caring for the aging, slipping mother-in-law with grace and sacrifice. Let Daniel look at me with that hesitant pity. Because behind that bookshelf, the little camera was still watching. And now, I had started wearing a microphone too. A small one. Clipped inside the lining of my cardigan. Connected to a recording app on an old phone I had hidden in my sock drawer. She wanted stories. I'd give her stories. But mine would come with proof. Real proof. They think older women are harmless. That our quietness means we're fading. But the truth is, we've just been listening longer. It began with a towel. A simple, white bath towel. Folded the wrong way. That's how it always starts with women like Sophie, small things, petty things. But they're never really about towels or spices or thermostats. They're about control. The baby had just gone down for a nap. Daniel was upstairs, working in his home office. I had just done a load of laundry, mine and Sophie's combined, as I always did to be helpful. I folded everything on the dining table, placing each item in neat, organized stacks. I even refolded 2 shirts because they had a small wrinkle. Then she walked in. Sophie looked at the table like it was covered in sewage. You folded the bath towels in half. I looked at her, confused. Yes. I always have. She walked over, picked one up like it was contaminated. We do thirds. Rolled. For cabinet symmetry. I started to apologize. But she was already refolding them, angrily, dramatically, each fold punctuated with an exhale like she was performing surgery on failure. I spend hours organizing these cabinets, she muttered. And you just walk in and decide your way is better? That's not what I meant. Do you know how hard I work to keep this house clean? To maintain balance? And you just keep doing whatever you want. I stepped back. I was only trying to help. She turned. And in a flash that still replays in my head in perfect detail, her hand struck me. The sound wasn't loud. But it echoed. A short, sharp slap across my left cheek. Enough to sting. Enough to stop time. I didn't move. I couldn't. The shock pinned me in place. Her chest rose and fell fast, like even she didn't expect herself to do it. And then, right on cue, footsteps. Daniel entered the room. He looked between us, at my stunned expression, at her hands still in midair. What happened? Before I could say a word, Sophie gasped and clutched her cheek like she had been struck. She came at me, she said, voice trembling. She snapped. I just asked her about the towels, and she grabbed me. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Not yet. Sophie turned to Daniel. She's been getting worse, Dan. You've seen it too. She's confused, she's moody, she gets defensive over everything. I didn't touch you, I finally said. She turned to me, eyes wide, voice syrupy with false concern. You must have blacked out. You didn't even realize. It's okay. That's when I saw it. In Daniel's face. The pause. The moment where belief and doubt wrestled behind his eyes. He looked at me. Really looked. Then he dropped his gaze and rubbed his temples. Let's all take a breath, he mumbled. We're all tired. It's just a misunderstanding. Sophie was crying now. Soft, wounded sobs into her sleeve. Daniel put an arm around her and led her out of the room. And I stood alone in the quiet. Cheek burning. Heart thudding. But even in that moment, I felt something else rise inside me, something that wasn't pain or shame. It was clarity. She crossed the line. And I let her. Just this once. Because now she had made her biggest mistake yet. She thought the lie would stay hers. But I had the mic on. And the camera in the corner had caught everything, every word, every gesture, every tearless sob she gave for performance. I waited till the house was asleep. Then I played it back. Watched myself flinch. Heard her lie. Saw Daniel's silence. I watched it 3 times. Then I backed it up. Twice. And I wrote on the top of that day's entry, the beginning of the end. It arrived like most betrayals do, unannounced, but deeply prepared. A knock on the door. 3 sharp taps. Not impatient. Just official. I opened it to find a woman standing there with a clipboard in hand and a government badge clipped to her jacket. Behind her was another, a man, slightly older, with calm eyes and a neutral expression. Margaret Fields, she asked. Yes? I'm Dana Wilkes. This is Frank Meyer. We're from Adult Protective Services. We received a report and would like to ask you a few questions. My stomach dropped. I stepped back, gave them room. My hands shook as I gestured toward the living room. They sat on the edge of the couch like they were trained not to get comfortable. Sophie appeared behind them within seconds, holding the baby like a trophy. Her hair was perfectly tousled, her sweatshirt soft and maternal. She smiled warmly at the social workers. I didn't want to make a big deal, she said sweetly, but there have been incidents. Dana turned to me. Mrs. Fields, your daughter-in-law mentioned some concerns, episodes of confusion, forgetting things on the stove, leaving doors open. Would you say that's accurate? I took a breath. I'd say that none of those things happened. But I understand how easy it is to be misunderstood when you're older. Dana nodded, scribbling something. We're just here to make sure everyone's safe. You understand. Safe. What a complicated word. Frank added, have you been feeling stressed? Disoriented? Any medical conditions we should know about? No, I said. I'm grieving. I lost my husband last year. But I've never had any cognitive issues. I read daily, I cook, I clean, and I care for my grandson when I'm allowed to. I think that's normal. Sophie cleared her throat. She's not always that clear. You know, Sometimes she tells me stories multiple times in a row, or she forgets she already fed the baby. I've had to quietly step in so many times. That was a lie. A full fabrication. The baby's feedings were always handled by Sophie. Not because I couldn't, because I wasn't allowed to. Dana turned to me. Can you tell me about the last week? Have there been any incidents? I met her eyes. No. But there have been patterns. Gaslighting. Manipulation. Lies. All of them coming from her. I pointed, gently, at Sophie. I can prove it. I've been documenting everything. Dana's pen slowed. I beg your pardon? I have notes, I said. And recordings. Sophie's smile twitched. Just slightly. Her grip on the baby tightened. I installed a hidden camera. For my safety, I added. Not to spy. But to protect myself after things started getting tense. Dana and Frank exchanged glances. Would you be willing to share those recordings with us? Dana asked carefully. Yes, I said. But I'd like you to come back tomorrow, when I've had time to organize and make copies. Sophie's expression was a mix of amusement and discomfort. She let out a small laugh, the kind people make when they think someone else is digging their own grave. Honestly, she said, I think you're seeing things that aren't there. I know it's hard, losing a spouse, adjusting to change. We're just trying to help you. That's all. I understand, Dana said neutrally. We'll follow up tomorrow. When they left, Sophie didn't speak to me. Not a single word. She went upstairs, closed the door, and didn't come back down until midnight. I stayed in the kitchen, copying video clips onto a flash drive. Labeled everything by date, time, and topic. March 11th, verbal mockery. March 14th, false accusation, remote. March 19th, physical assault, cheek slap. March 22nd, gaslighting, baby monitor incident. It wasn't a journal anymore. It was a case file. The social workers had been trained to look for bruises, neglect, fear. They rarely saw abuse coming from someone young and attractive and polished. But I was going to show them what it looked like when cruelty wore Lululemon and false concern. By morning, I had every clip ready. Every page of my written log printed. Every audio file labeled. If Sophie wanted to paint me as unstable, she'd have to do it while standing in front of a wall of evidence she didn't know existed. She thought she had turned the system against me. But she forgot one thing: I've been playing by the rules. And I've been recording everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had accused me of forgetting things. Misplacing them. Making up stories. And yet the only thing she truly forgot was that I had been watching her the entire time. It started with one hidden camera. A simple, battery-powered model tucked behind the bookshelf in the living room. It looked like part of a digital photo frame. Harmless. Decorative. Unnoticed. After the slap, I bought 2 more. One above the kitchen pantry. Another placed in the hallway, disguised as an air freshener. Each one no bigger than a lipstick tube. It felt wrong at first. Sneaky. Intrusive. Like I was crossing some invisible line. But then I reminded myself, lines only matter when both sides agree to honor them. Sophie had obliterated that agreement the moment she raised her hand. The moment she lied about it. The moment she weaponized my grief and age as a narrative. So I stopped feeling guilty. The camera became my witness. And oh, did it witness things. It caught her rolling her eyes behind Daniel's back when I spoke. It caught her tossing away food I made and claiming she forgot to serve it. It caught her logging into Daniel's email to delete messages from me. It caught her recording voicemails of me humming lullabies, then mocking the sound to her friends in group chats. It caught her whispering to the baby, "Your grandma's not well. But you're too little to know that yet." It caught everything. And so did the microphone. The small recording device I pinned into the hem of my cardigan each morning, clicking it on before I even stepped out of my bedroom. The audio wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to capture tone, inflection, cruelty disguised as concern. I began syncing the audio with the video clips, organizing folders on my laptop, backing them up to an encrypted USB drive, which I hid beneath the padding of an old jewelry box, one Sophie would never look in, because the pieces were outdated. Every night, I would sit on my bed and review the day. Watch it back like a movie. Except in this one, I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the crazy old woman losing her grip. I was the protagonist. The silent observer. The historian. Sophie thought she was winning because I was quiet. Because I didn't fight. Because I smiled and nodded and folded towels. But she mistook quiet for weak. And she mistook patience for surrender. That was her greatest flaw. The camera didn't judge. It didn't miss things. It didn't forget or misplace or confuse. It didn't get tired or overwhelmed. And it was always watching. One morning, I caught her on camera standing in the hallway, holding my toothbrush. Just holding it. Staring at it. Then she dropped it into the toilet. Fished it out. Rinsed it off. Put it back in the cup like nothing happened. I didn't say a word. I threw it away the next day and bought a new one. Then I labeled the footage, March 24th, hygiene sabotage. Level, malicious. And still, Daniel remained blind. Or maybe just unwilling to see. I told myself, one day, I would show him everything. And I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't accuse. I'd just press play. I began planning for that day. Carefully. Strategically. It wouldn't be spontaneous. It would be undeniable. She was so used to performing her perfection for him. Always just slightly out of my reach. But the camera had brought her closer. Captured her without the mask. And I realized that when you see someone enough times in private, you learn what they really are. What I saw was cruelty. What I saw was strategy. And what I recorded was evidence. Some people plan escapes. Others plan weddings or renovations. I planned the truth. By now, the camera had captured weeks of evidence. A portrait of daily erosion. Of being picked apart, inch by inch, until nothing was left but the shell Sophie wanted me to be, fragile, confused, and most importantly, removable. But the difference between her plan and mine was this: hers relied on fantasy. Mine relied on fact. I knew I couldn't confront her directly. She'd twist it. Spin it. Cry if she had to. That was her weapon, performance. But what she didn't know was that I had something better than confrontation. I had patience. And I had a plan. It started with a phone call. Donna Hastings. Retired social worker. Friend since university. The kind of woman who didn't waste words and had a steel trap for remembering them. She had helped hundreds of families navigate abuse cases, elder care battles, and custody wars. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, but I dialed her number with more confidence than I expected. "Margaret," she said when she picked up. "It's been ages." I didn't even bother easing into it. I told her everything. By the time I finished, there was no silence on the other end, only the sound of paper rustling as she began taking notes. "You've got video evidence?" she asked. "Yes." "Audio?" "Yes." "Written logs?" "Every day for the past 2 months." Donna exhaled. "Then we're going to bury her in the truth." It wasn't revenge she spoke with, it was focus. The same way a surgeon might talk before a complicated procedure. We met the next day at a cafe near the library. I wore a scarf and sunglasses like someone who needed a disguise, not to hide from public shame, but to cloak the strength I was building behind closed doors. I handed her a folder of printed transcripts, copies of flash drives, and a bullet point timeline of events. She read in silence. Her mouth tightened as she scanned. "She's building a case to have you declared mentally incompetent," Donna said, finally. "It's subtle, but it's there. Isolated behavior, cognitive episodes, hygiene decline, all textbook elder abuse framing. This isn't just harassment anymore, Margaret. This is calculated." I nodded. "I know. She's trying to make you disappear, legally. If she convinces the right people that you're losing your grip, Daniel can sign off on placing you in a memory care facility. Or worse." I felt that word land like a weight in my chest. Disappear. That's what this had been about all along. I wasn't just in her way, I was in her house. Her story. Her control. But not for much longer. Donna tapped the folder. "You're lucky. Most women don't have this. Video. Voice. A timeline. All you need now is timing. You hit them with this too soon, she recovers. You wait too long, you risk losing your voice in this. We need a climax. A moment she can't walk away from," I said. "Exactly. So we made a plan. I would request a family dinner. A farewell of sorts. One final, gentle, gesture to show how fragile and soft I'd become. I'd set the stage like a proper actress. Let her believe the role she'd cast me in was now the truth. Then, in front of Daniel, and anyone else I could get into the room, I would show them the real footage. No anger. No outburst. Just a screen, and a remote. We picked a date. Donna would attend, not as a friend, but as a silent observer. I'd introduce her as a visiting neighbor, sitting quietly in the corner. And the moment Sophie reached for her usual performance, I would hit play. We practiced. We organized files. We arranged folders, printed a second set, mailed a third to Donna's daughter in case of any mishaps. Sophie didn't suspect a thing. She was too busy posting curated baby photos and telling the neighbors how sweet but lost I'd become. She laughed a little louder when Daniel was around. Touched his arm when she said my name, like she needed comforting just for tolerating me. I smiled through all of it. Because the truth was loaded and waiting. And when it hit, it wouldn't just expose her. It would set me free. The day before it all came undone, Sophie celebrated. Not publicly, not with cake or champagne, she was too clever for that, but with a quiet, confident kind of glee. The kind that lives in posture, in how someone moves through a space they believe they own. She hummed as she packed boxes in the guest room closet, the very room I slept in. She said they were just clearing some space for the baby's things, but I saw the empty suitcase sitting under the bed. Mine. The one I had used when I moved in. That night, I found one of my cardigans already folded on top. She was preparing. I imagine, in her head, she'd already planned it all. The tears she would fake. The worried look she'd wear when she'd tell Daniel, "I just don't think she's safe anymore. Not around the baby." The way she'd tilt her head and say, "Maybe it's time to talk to someone about options." She had the whole performance rehearsed. What she didn't know was that I'd already written the final act. And it wasn't hers. That evening, I overheard a phone call. I wasn't snooping, just passing by the slightly ajar door of the nursery when I heard her voice, light and victorious. "She's slipping," she told someone. "Daniel's almost there. 1 or 2 more episodes, and he'll make the call himself. We'll have the house to ourselves before summer." She paused, then laughed softly. "I know." She actually said she wanted to host a goodbye dinner. Can you believe that? I told her it was a lovely idea. Give her the closure she needs. She lowered her voice a little then, but not enough. "I'm not even worried anymore. She's not a threat. She's just sad." I stood there, a breath caught in my throat, and then I backed away. Slow. Controlled. Let her have this, I told myself. Let her feel the wind at her back. Let her believe the finish line was hers. Because tomorrow, she wouldn't be holding a trophy. She'd be watching the race collapse beneath her. Later that night, I emailed Donna to confirm everything. We reviewed the video files one final time. I printed a fresh set of notes and attached them to the folders we'd prepared. Sophie didn't even ask why I spent more time in my room that day. She assumed I was sulking, retreating, giving up. And honestly, I let her think that. Because for a woman like Sophie, nothing is more satisfying than the belief that she's finally won. That she's the smart one. The survivor. The one who gets the last word. But I've lived long enough to know something she clearly hasn't learned: the last word doesn't always belong to the loudest voice. Sometimes it comes from the quietest room. And mine was ready. The morning of the dinner, the house was calm. Too calm. Sophie had a glow to her. That smug serenity people get when they think their version of reality has finally won. She was in the kitchen when I came down, pouring almond milk into a smoothie blender, humming some nameless melody that seemed far too cheerful for someone who had, less than a month ago, accused me of dementia. "Morning," she said, bright and breezy. "How'd you sleep?" I nodded politely. "Fine, thank you." She looked me up and down. "Wearing the blue blouse? That's a good color for you. Brings out your softness." Softness. What a word. She used it like a backhand. It sounded like a compliment, but it wasn't. It never was. Not when it came from her. She was already dressed for the evening ahead. Hair curled, makeup light but flawless. She wore her dinner party dress, the olive green wrap she always chose when guests were coming, because it made her look both elegant and effortless. There were no guests this time. Just Daniel. Me. And Sophie. And Donna, though Sophie didn't know about her yet. Daniel came down an hour later, still groggy from work. He looked surprised to see the table set, candles arranged neatly, 3 plates laid out. "What's the occasion?" he asked. "Mom wanted to do a little farewell dinner," Sophie said sweetly, brushing a speck of dust from his collar. "Just the 3 of us. A goodbye before we start looking into next steps." He looked confused. "Next steps?" She gave him a meaningful look. "You know. Just thinking ahead." He rubbed his temples. "Right." Then he turned to me. "You didn't have to go through all this, Mom. But, thank you." I smiled. It felt right. Sophie leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "We'll eat around 7, yeah? That gives me time to put the baby down. I want everything to be peaceful." Peaceful. I could barely contain my breath. Everything I had gathered, every file, every frame, every whispered insult and choreographed cruelty, waited upstairs on the laptop Donna had helped me prep. This wasn't just a dinner. It was the final scene. But Sophie had one more move planned. One final attempt to own the moment before it was no longer hers. Just before dinner, while Daniel was outside taking a call, she came to my door. Knocked once and stepped in without waiting. "Hey," she said, eyes scanning the room. "Can I talk to you for a second?" I set down the folded napkins in my lap and looked up. "Of course." She sat on the edge of the bed, crossed her legs like she was settling in for a business pitch. "I want to make sure tonight's calm," she said, voice syrupy and slow. "No surprises. No dramatics." "I wasn't planning any," I replied. "Good." She tilted her head. "Because Daniel's on edge. He's been under pressure lately. And if something were to happen, anything that made him feel unsafe or responsible for fixing things, I don't think that'd be fair to him, do you?" There it was. The threat hidden under sugar. She smiled and leaned in slightly. "And I'd been thinking, after tonight, maybe it's time we talk about a more comfortable arrangement for you. Somewhere quieter. Maybe even assisted. I found a lovely facility just outside the city. They do crafts. Book clubs. You'd like it. I met her eyes. Calm. Unblinking. I'm sure they'd have a room for someone like me, I said. She beamed. Exactly. I wanted to laugh. She thought she'd won. Thought this was the final push, the clean handoff, the last breadcrumb before I wandered off the path entirely. I stood slowly and picked up the laptop from the dresser. Sophie looked at it. Then at me. What's that? I smiled. Something to show at dinner. She narrowed her eyes. What? You said no surprises. I promise this isn't one. Just a little highlight reel of my time here. Her smile faltered for a split second, then recovered. Okay, she said, rising. If it makes you feel seen. It will, I said. Because I had no intention of leaving that house silently. Not tonight. The table was set for 3. Sophie had lit candles, dimmed the lights just enough to create a soft, warm glow, and placed the silverware with her usual obsessive precision. It all looked perfect. But like everything in that house, it was a performance. A mask. And tonight, I was going to tear it off. Daniel came downstairs first, hair still damp from a quick shower, wearing a shirt Sophie had laid out for him earlier. She did that sometimes, chose his clothes without saying a word. He let her. That's what quiet submission looks like in marriages like theirs, not bruises, not yelling, just small, daily choices handed over like folded laundry. Sophie descended moments later, radiant, beaming, holding the baby briefly on her hip before handing him off to the bassinet in the next room. Let's eat, she said brightly. One last peaceful dinner before things shift. She never said the word facility. Not in front of Daniel. That was always saved for private conversations. For whispers and loaded glances. I took my seat. The same one I always used. I'd placed a small laptop on the console table nearby, already plugged into the TV screen. I'd angled it just right, out of Sophie's direct line of sight. Donna was already sitting in the living room, having arrived under the guise of a neighbor stopping by. She sipped her tea quietly, observing. Dinner began the way you'd expect. Small talk. Forks clinking. Sophie laughing too loudly at something Daniel said. The baby stirred once and Sophie dashed to the nursery to soothe him with a practiced hand. Then came my cue. I stood slowly. My voice gentle. Almost frail. Before dessert, I said, I have something I'd like to share. Sophie looked up mid-sip, eyebrows raised. Share? Yes, I said. A video. Just a little something I put together. A goodbye gift, I suppose. Daniel blinked. Mom, you didn't have to, I know, I said. But I wanted to. I walked to the laptop, opened the file, and pressed play. The screen came to life. For the first 10 seconds, there was just static silence. Then, Sophie's voice. Don't touch him. I don't want him smelling like soup all night. The footage rolled. Sophie lunging, slapping. Sophie twisting stories about baby monitors. Sophie mocking my voice to her friends. Sophie pouring food into the sink, then telling Daniel I'd forgotten to cook. Sophie standing with my toothbrush above the toilet. Her face drained as it played. Daniel sat frozen. No one spoke. Even the baby monitor, from the other room, stayed quiet, as if the house itself was holding its breath. When the video ended, I turned back to them. Daniel's expression was vacant. Sophie recovered first. What the hell is this, she said, voice thin. Are you spying on us? I looked at her, calmly. No. I was protecting myself. She turned to Daniel. She manipulated this. Anyone can edit videos. YouTube exists. You think this proves something? It proves she's paranoid. I said nothing. Donna stood then. Walked to the center of the room. I'm Donna Hastings, she said. I'm a retired social worker. I've been assisting Margaret for the past few weeks. Everything you just watched is catalogued, verified, and backed up. The files have been submitted to the proper legal authorities. Sophie paled. You can't be serious. Donna continued, unfazed. What I saw tonight is evidence of emotional abuse, intimidation, and possible legal manipulation. Your language alone, your posture, your tone, it's textbook. Sophie opened her mouth. Shut it. Looked at Daniel, silently begging him to intervene. He stared at her. Then at me. His voice came out like a whisper. Is all of this real? I nodded once. He looked sick. Sophie reached out to him, desperate now. Dan. You can't believe this. She's twisted it. You know how she is. This is your mother, for God's sake. Yes, he said, voice sharper than I'd heard in months. She is. Sophie stepped back. And I sat down again, quietly, at the same place I'd sat for every meal. The same chair where I'd been insulted, dismissed, erased. Only now, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. You'd think the final moment would be loud. Screaming. Crashing. Tears. But it wasn't. It was quiet. It came down to a remote. The room sat in stunned silence after the video ended, the air thick with something more potent than any argument, truth. Sophie stood frozen, her eyes darting between us like a cornered animal looking for an escape. Daniel still hadn't moved. His hands lay in his lap, palms open, as if he was waiting for someone to fill them with an explanation that wouldn't come. And I simply reached for the small black remote on the console table. Let me show you one more, I said gently. Sophie snapped. You've made your point, Margaret. Her voice trembled now, the performative calm unraveling. I think it's important he sees the full picture, I said, clicking play again. This clip wasn't long. Just 1 minute. A Thursday morning. I was cleaning the kitchen island. The baby was asleep. Sophie walked in, opened the fridge, stared inside. Then she closed it, looked around, and pulled the TV remote from under her sweatshirt. She placed it inside the dishwasher. Closed the door. Then, to no one in particular, she whispered, let's see how long she looks for it this time. The video cut out. Daniel inhaled sharply, like he'd just surfaced from underwater. The color drained from Sophie's face. Her voice came out shrill now, stripped of any warmth. You're spying on us? That's what this is? You've been filming your own family? I turned toward her. Calm. Clear. No. I was documenting a situation that had become unsafe. You're not the victim here, she shouted. You're manipulating everything. Donna stepped forward then, her presence quiet but solid. Legally, she said, Margaret had every right to record interactions in her own residence, especially given that this house was partially paid for by her and her late husband, and she holds legal interest in the property. That paperwork was submitted with the footage. Sophie's jaw clenched. Her eyes flicked to Daniel. But he wouldn't meet her gaze anymore. He stood. Slowly. Sophie, he said, his voice rough. You lied to me. 4 months. I was protecting us. The baby. You were never around, she was undermining everything. He didn't respond. Not immediately. Then he turned to me. I'm so sorry, Mom. I gave a small nod. I know. Sophie let out a dry laugh, trying one more angle. So what now? What, are you going to throw me out? Over a few videos? No, I said. Then I stood. You are. Her eyes widened. What? I handed Daniel a manila envelope. Inside is the legal motion I filed with Donna's help. Effective immediately, I am reclaiming my stake in this house. As of tomorrow, it will no longer be yours to command." She looked at Daniel in disbelief. "You wouldn't." But he just stared at her. Heartbroken. And silent. Which was answer enough. Donna walked to the door and opened it. Not as a command, but as a gesture. It was time. Sophie stood there, mouth open, blinking like a child waking from a bad dream. But no one came to her rescue. She grabbed her bag. Mumbled something unintelligible. Then left. The door closed behind her with a softness that felt louder than any slam. And just like that, the quiet returned. Only this time, it belonged to me. There's a silence that follows truth. Not awkward. Not empty. Just, final. That's what settled in the house after the door clicked shut behind Sophie. It was the kind of quiet I hadn't heard since Charles died. But this time, it wasn't grief. It wasn't absence. It was the sound of something false leaving, and something honest finally having room to breathe. Daniel sat at the dining table, head in his hands. He hadn't moved since Sophie left. The candle wax had long cooled. The dinner plate sat half-eaten, untouched. Even the baby monitor was still, the screen dark. I stood across from him, my laptop still open, the last paused frame of Sophie's cruelty frozen on the screen. He finally lifted his head. "How long?" he asked. "Since the day she smiled at me and said the thermostat made her sinuses swell." He gave a faint, broken laugh. It sounded like it hurt coming out. "I thought she was just stressed," he said. "She told me you were fading. Slipping. That you were getting forgetful." She said it with such concern. "That's the trick," I said. She didn't need to prove anything. She just had to plant the idea. And once you believed it, everything else fit the story. "I didn't want to believe it," he murmured. "But you did." He nodded. Slowly. "Yeah. I did." For a while, we sat like that. Two people sifting through the same wreckage from opposite ends. I didn't hate him. Not even then. He was just blind. Not willfully. Not cruelly. But deeply. Like so many people are when they love the wrong person and don't know it until it's too late. "I'm sorry," he said again. This time, he meant it so completely I almost felt it in the floorboards. I walked to the console, closed the laptop, and picked up the remote, the same one Sophie had hidden so many times. "This little thing," I said, turning it in my hand, "captured the entire story." He looked at it like it was a relic. Sacred. Damning. I kept thinking I was crazy, I added. That maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she was right about me. "She wasn't," he said quickly. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "You didn't know that?" "Not really." He stood and crossed the room to me. "She made me doubt my own mother," he said. "That's something I'll never stop regretting." "And now?" He looked at me. Really looked. "Now I see everything." That was enough for now. Not forgiveness. Not erasure. Just truth. Spoken out loud. With no camera needed to catch it. The rest of the evening moved in slow motion. Daniel packed a bag for Sophie, just the essentials. Left it outside the door. He didn't tell me what came next, and I didn't ask. That was his mess to deal with. Later, I walked into the nursery and looked at my grandson, sleeping in the soft blue glow of the nightlight. His little hand curled into a loose fist. So unaware of the war that had taken place outside his door. I reached out and gently touched his forehead. Not a word. Just presence. The house didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like mine again. I returned to my room, opened the notebook where I'd restarted my entries, and wrote, March 30th, she's gone. The truth is out. Daniel sees it now. Not broken, just awake. And for the first time in months, I didn't flinch when I heard footsteps. The truth wasn't loud. It didn't come with shouts or sirens. It came on a screen. With footage. And quiet. The kind that settles after the storm has finally passed. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. No begging. No apologies. No dramatic scenes at the door. Sophie didn't come back, not that night, not the next morning. She sent Daniel a single text, "Tell your mother congratulations. She finally won." He didn't reply. Neither of us did. It was only after her silence that the pieces began to shift. That's the thing about people like Sophie, when they lose control, they don't fight. They disappear. Because without control, they have nothing left to stand on. But even if she left quietly, her presence still echoed through the house. I saw it in the way Daniel moved, slow, deliberate, like a man trying to find the edges of his own guilt. I heard it in the questions he didn't ask. The things he wasn't yet ready to say. And I felt it, in every corner of the house where she'd once hovered, corrected, directed. But day by day, the silence began to feel less like a wound, and more like a clearing. 3 days after the dinner, Daniel asked if we could talk. He made coffee. The real kind. Not the herbal nonsense Sophie used to drink. We sat at the kitchen island. No baby monitor. No candles. Just us. "I spoke with a lawyer," he said. I looked up. "She doesn't own a share of the house. Legally, she never did. It's in my name, but," he trailed off. "That was your money. Your home. And I let her make you feel like a guest in it." I didn't respond. I let the words hang, because they didn't need my forgiveness to land. They just needed air. "I've started the paperwork," he continued. "To transfer co-ownership to you. 50-50. It's the least I can do." "That's not necessary," I said softly. "But thank you." He hesitated. "There's something else." I waited. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking 10 years younger and 20 years more tired. "She lied about a lot more than I realized," he said. "I've been going through our emails, the shared accounts. She had plans. Bigger than just getting you out." My stomach turned. "What kind of plans?" "She was trying to move funds. Slowly. Into a private account. She had a spreadsheet labeled exit strategy. She was going to leave eventually. Take the baby, the money, everything." I stared at him, stunned. He looked down at his coffee. "She never planned to stay with me. She was just playing the long game." I didn't see it. "Not until you showed me." And that's when I understood something I hadn't fully grasped before. I wasn't the only victim in this house. He had been lied to. Controlled. Cut off from his instincts. Convinced to ignore the things he once believed in. Just like I had. Only for him, it had taken longer to wake up. "I'm filing for divorce," he said. "Full custody. And I'm going to make sure she doesn't set foot in this house again." I nodded. It was the right decision. But I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't need to. He already carried that weight on his own. That night, I returned to my room and sat at the edge of the bed. The camera was still there, blinking softly in standby mode. I hadn't turned it off yet. I picked it up. Held it in my hand. Then I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where Daniel used to keep junk batteries and loose screws, and placed it inside. I closed the drawer. Locked it. Done. That camera had been my voice. But I didn't need it anymore. Not in this house. Some people say justice is slow. But in my case, it was steady. Clean. Inevitable. After Sophie walked out of the house, the legal gears began to turn. Donna, who had remained a steady presence behind the scenes, helped me file a formal report. Everything we documented, footage, audio files, written logs, was packaged into a case summary and sent to the local elder protection unit. She told me, this isn't about punishing her. It's about making a record. Ensuring there's no future victim. I understood that. But deep down, I also wanted her to face what she'd done. Not just to me, but to Daniel, and to that baby, who would have grown up with a version of the truth she invented. The legal process began quietly. A notice of investigation was issued. Sophie was formally contacted. The report detailed patterns of emotional abuse, calculated manipulation, attempted financial coercion, and the beginnings of what the courts called intent to exploit. She responded with an email, short, bitter, full of the same false confidence she always wore like a second skin. This is just an old woman's paranoia, backed by her bitter social worker friend. I've done nothing illegal. Donna read it once, raised an eyebrow, and said, perfect. Let her hang herself with her own arrogance. I didn't expect Daniel to get involved beyond the divorce, but he did. He provided written testimony, detailing what he had seen with his own eyes during and after that dinner. He verified the footage, authenticated the email evidence of her financial schemes, and submitted his own series of timelines showing the household restrictions and gaslighting that had unfolded under Sophie's lead. It wasn't just his apology anymore. It was action. We met once at the attorney's office, the three of us, me, Donna, and Daniel. There were papers to sign, property restructuring, financial protections, legal boundaries. Daniel said something I'll never forget. I used to think protecting my family meant keeping the peace, he said. Now I know, it means standing between them and harm. Even when the harm comes from someone you thought you loved. There was a quiet nod of agreement from the attorney. And just like that, I was legally restored. My half of the house was formalized in writing. My rights as a resident were unshakable. Sophie, by court order, was no longer permitted within 100 feet of the property. The divorce moved forward, cleanly, swiftly. Her attorney tried once to question my credibility, but the judge shut it down before I even had to open my mouth. The footage had already spoken. At the end of the hearing, the judge said one thing, off the record. I've seen elder abuse in many forms, she said, looking me straight in the eye. But rarely do I see someone fight back this effectively. You didn't just survive. You built a case. You told the truth, and you told it well. It stayed with me. Not because it was praise. But because it reminded me that silence is not weakness. It's potential. It's space. And when the moment comes, it becomes something sharper than any scream, clarity. Sophie didn't return. No appeals. No letters. Just silence. And that suited me just fine. I wasn't angry anymore. She didn't deserve my energy. I had bigger things to focus on. Because now, I had time. Space. And something I hadn't felt in months, purpose. After Sophie was gone, after the legal work was done, after the storm had finally passed, the house settled into a new kind of silence. Not the tense, watching your steps silence I'd lived under for months. Not the silence of grief, either. This silence was something else. It was mine. And I filled it, not with noise, but with meaning. It began with a letter. A woman from our neighborhood association had heard about what happened. Word traveled, quietly and respectfully. One morning I found an envelope in the mailbox, no return address. Inside was a note, handwritten in blue ink. You don't know me well, but I heard what you went through. I'm living with something similar. If you ever want to talk, even just for tea, please call. Her name was Margaret too. And she wasn't the last. Over the next few weeks, more stories surfaced. From church acquaintances. From friends of friends. From women in their 60s, 70s, even 80s, who had been sidelined in their own homes. Controlled. Gaslit. Slowly erased by daughters-in-law, caretakers, sometimes even their own children. Most of them didn't fight back. Not because they couldn't. But because they didn't know they could. That's when the idea came. I cleared out the guest room. The very room I'd once been confined to, monitored in, silenced in. I took down Sophie's decorative prints, quotes about gratitude and balance that now rang like bad jokes, and replaced them with something simpler, a cork board. A round table with 4 chairs. A bookshelf filled with stories by women. A stack of notebooks and pens. And a sign on the door, the quiet room for women with too much to say, and nowhere safe to say it. It started small. The first night, just 3 of us. Margaret, myself, and a woman named Helen whose son had recently tried to take power of attorney over her finances without asking. We drank tea. We shared stories. And for the first time in a long time, we didn't feel invisible. By the 3rd week, there were 8 of us. Some came trembling. Others came furious. All of us came with something we hadn't had in a long time, voice. We didn't shout. We didn't scream. We spoke. Clearly. Firmly. Slowly. We talked about boundaries. Legal tools. How to spot manipulation. How to prepare a plan. We helped one another reclaim parts of ourselves we thought had been lost forever. Some days, it felt like a support group. Other days, it felt like a revolution. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by during a session to drop off groceries. He peeked into the room and smiled faintly. "Looks different in here," he said. I smiled back. "It is." He hesitated at the door. "Are you happy?" I thought about it. Then nodded. "I'm getting there." He stepped forward. "I'm proud of you, Mom." It was the first time I'd heard that in years. That evening, I stayed in the quiet room long after everyone had left. I lit a candle. I looked at the empty chairs and felt the power of what they now held. Once, this room had been where I shrank. Now it was where I expanded. Where I grew back into myself. And when I sat down to write in my journal that night, I didn't log a wound. I logged a beginning. Let me tell you something important. They will try to write your ending for you. They'll do it quietly, kindly, even with a smile. They'll say, "It's time to rest." They'll say, "Don't worry about all that." They'll say, "You're better off letting go." But I'm here to say, you can hold the pen. I nearly forgot that. For months, I shrank myself to keep the peace. Bit my tongue to avoid being too much. Tiptoed around a house I helped pay for, around people I had once trusted with my heart. And look where silence brought me. But also, look where truth did. It didn't roar. It didn't crash like thunder. It came gently, with a quiet voice and a blinking light behind a bookshelf. And it was enough. Sophie never returned. She never filed an appeal. Her silence was the final admission. Daniel's divorce was granted. Full custody awarded. Financial restitution pending. But that wasn't the victory. This was, last week, I sat in the quiet room with 12 other women. The youngest was 59. The oldest, 83. We drank tea. We passed around a book. We laughed. Not politely, fully, loudly. The kind of laugh you don't let yourself have when you're constantly watching your step. And I looked around and realized, I didn't just survive Sophie. I reclaimed myself. Piece by piece. Voice by voice. I started receiving emails, too, viewers who had found out about my story from Donna's daughter, who helped quietly share my case online, with my permission. The messages poured in, "Your story is my mother's story. This happened to my aunt, but she never spoke up. You gave me the courage to record what I couldn't prove. Thank you. I never expected to be a symbol. I just didn't want to be a ghost. And now? Now I'm standing. Not loud. Not angry. Just here. Still. And if you've made it this far, if you've listened to my story, page by page, moment by moment, thank you. Truly. Before I close this chapter, I want to ask you two small things. If this story resonated with you, please like it, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. There are so many more stories like mine waiting to be told, and silence is no longer acceptable. And tell me, where are you listening from? Your city, your country, your kitchen table, your headphones during a walk. I want to know. Because even though I began this journey alone, I didn't end it that way. This was never just about a daughter-in-law. It was about not disappearing. It was about being heard. This was the quiet room. But it doesn't feel so quiet anymore. Not with all of you here. Thank you for listening. Margaret Fields.